Hi, I'm Mark. This is Mark's Tech Vlogs on YouTube, and today I want to talk about why I personally think the Apple Watch Ultra 2 is the one to buy at the end of 2025 going into 2026. Now, I haven't actually reviewed an Apple Watch on this channel since 2019 when I got my Apple Watch 4, but I have in fact been using an Apple Watch since 2017, and it's a piece of tech that I honestly don't think I could live without. And up until about a month ago, I've been using a Series 7. And I use it pretty much every day for everything from paying for things to tracking my sleep and tracking runs. I even use it for things like unlocking my Mac and kind of focusing on video because I film these things on my iPhone. I use the remote camera app on my watch. And as I said, until about a month ago, I was using a Series 7, but the battery life on it was getting poor. It was obviously getting a bit older, and so I decided to take the plunge and get the Ultra 2. And in this video, I want to talk about why, despite Apple announcing the Ultra 3, I personally decided to go for the Ultra 2. And I also want to talk about why actually that might be the best value Apple Watch that is out there right now. And so this video is going to be in kind of two parts. I'm going to share my opinions on why the Ultra 2 is probably the best option for people to go for. And then I'm also going to go into the Ultra 2 and all of its features, and that will kind of serve as a review as well. I'll put chapters below so you can find everything. I'm aware that there's some of you watching this video right now who will know how Apple product releases work. And you'll be watching this video going, yes, but you can't buy the Ultra Watch 2 anymore. And actually, that's sort of not true at the time of recording. So if you go on Amazon, you can get the Ultra Watch 2 for about £670. This is about £100 off the regular price, but it's still pretty eye-watering for a watch. And that's really why I decided to go for the Ultra 2 myself, and where I'm coming up with this video. Because if you go onto somewhere like eBay or Vinted, you can very easily find an Apple Watch Ultra 2 for around the £400 mark. And that's not one that's been used excessively and been battered around. The one that I got that was about £420 off Vinted literally came in its original box. Alongside that, the battery health was 100%, and I'm not convinced the strap had ever been taken out of a box other than to take the photo. Alongside that, if I check it in my devices app, I can see that it's still got a warranty with Apple until February. And all of that was around half the price of the Ultra 2 at new price. Now, the approach of getting a refurbished or nearly new Apple Watch does take a bit of research, and I will put a link below to a couple of eBay resellers that I've used before that are generally pretty good. And those also come with warranties. Of course, if you get it through somewhere like Vinted, you only get whatever warranty is left from Apple directly. But before I get into all the features and why I think it's a great product to go for, even over the three, let me talk about three things to look out for when you're buying a refurbished or used Apple Watch. The first thing is age. So Apple actually only released the black Apple Watch Ultra 2 about a year ago. That means if you go for one of those, you know it's going to be a year or newer. The titanium model has actually been around for a couple of years, so they're trickier to kind of guess the age of. The second thing to look at is battery health. And personally, I wouldn't buy one that has less than 95% battery health. As I said, the one I picked up was new, and you can always message a seller and ask what the battery health is, and I really recommend you do that. It is, however, worth noting that going directly to Apple, you can pay to have a battery replacement for an Apple Watch Ultra 2, and that will cost you £95. So if you find an absolute bargain with terrible battery health, you could factor that into your purchase cost. And the third thing to look out for is condition. Now, one of the reasons I've linked Music Magpie on eBay below if you're going to get an Apple Watch is not just because their prices are good and they offer warranties, and there's also pretty regularly voucher codes on eBay that'll get 20% off, but it's also because when it comes to their conditioning, I tend to find that they're overly cautious. So in the past, I have bought iPhones or slightly cheaper Apple Watches from them that they've kind of downgraded a bit, then actually found there's nothing wrong with them. But of course, condition is something to keep in mind if you're buying a used or refurbished Apple Watch. And yes, these things get scuffed because we wear them all the time and we knock them on things and all sorts, and they have gone more durable over the years. However, you also want to feel like you've got a new product. Like, yes, it's not going to be brand new and shiny wrapped, but you don't want something that's been knocked around loads, or at least I don't anyway. But if you look out for those three things, you can quite easily find an Apple Watch Ultra 2 in really good condition for kind of between £400 and £420. And in my opinion, as we're getting towards the end of 2025 going into 2026, this might be the best value Apple Watch out there. And that's especially true as the main improvements that came with the Apple Watch 3 were around slight battery life improvements, but also satellite coverage. And if you're not bothered about each of those, then actually it's a real bargain. And part of that is because you do get a lot of the new features thanks to watchOS 26. So let's dive more into the review part of this video and talk more about the features of the Apple Watch Ultra 2. So the Ultra 2 has a 49mm display with a titanium case. Personally, I love the black look of this. I think it looks so much better for titanium, and there was no way I was going to go titanium because for me it just felt like a big compromise. I think it looks really modern, I quite like the chunky design and the orange accents, and it does just go with anything you wear. It can still tuck under sleeves of a jumper as well. Now, if I'm being honest, I'm not 100% sure how I feel about the strap that my watch came with. It does look a little bit like corrugated card. However, in wearing it for about a month now, it's comfortable to wear and it's also pretty easy to adjust. The display on the device is a always-on Retina display and bright up to 3000 nits. This is plenty bright enough to see even in bright sunlight. The heart rate sensor means you get hypertension notifications, ECG, blood oxygen and the usual heart rate data as well. In comparison to my Series 7, I have found that the Ultra 2 does pick up my heart rate better when exercising. It also has sleep tracking, and that includes a new sleep score feature that came with watchOS 26. In addition to that, it does support sleep apnea notifications as well. In addition to that, it has temperature sensing and the ability to track cycles if you need it to. Now, all of the Apple Watch Ultra 2s have the option of cellular data if you want it, but this does require an extra paid plan, and it does depend what network you're on. Now, I use ID Mobile because I literally pay £6 a month, and I don't want to go back to something like O2 or 3 and pay a bit more in order just to pay more to have the data on my Apple Watch. I'm always with my phone, so I don't personally need it or use cellular. If you do go for cellular, it's worth noting that unlike the Ultra 3, it's not 5G compatible. Of course, it also has some extra safety features like international emergency calling, a siren and crash detection. There's also fall detection as well if you want to switch that on. And then for water resistance, it's water resistant up to 100 meters. It can also support tracking things like diving with depths up to 40 meters. And then inside you'll find the S9 chip. This means it supports things like wrist flicks and hand gestures to control the watch. It also supports precision finding for iPhone and faster on-device Siri. And then for battery life, according to Apple, it has up to 36 hours battery life on a full charge. They also say it can fast charge 0 to 80% in 1 hour. Of course, that will require the right charger. If we compare the Ultra 2 to the Ultra 3, the Ultra 2 does lack in a few places. So it has the A9 and not the A10 chip, which isn't noticeable speed difference, but it is worth noting it's got a slower processor. It has no 5G support and no satellite support too. It also has slightly worse battery life compared to the Ultra 3, but still better battery life than this year's other Apple Watch models. But the design itself is exactly the same. So let's talk about it. So coming up the Ultra from the Series 7, I love that it looks like a different Apple Watch. And in fact, the Ultra is really the first proper redesign the Apple Watch has ever had since it launched. I like the bezel around the side that protects the screen, I love the new action button, and I also think it looks really nice in black. The right hand button and the crown are protected by an area that does stick out a bit compared to other Apple Watches. And actually pressing the button and controlling the crown around the little stick up bit does take a little bit of getting used to compared to previous models. But this is there to help protect the crown and button and keep it nice and rugged. Now, I'm not noticing any scuffs on the black after using it for a month, but I am expecting it to get some over time. I think that's probably just going to happen as part of the whole thing of it being coated. So let's talk about what it's like to use and all of the features. And I'm one of those people who wears the Apple Watch all the time, apart from when I'm showering or when it's charging. That means I wear it overnight, and one of the things I'd seen in other reviews was people saying actually compared to the previous watch, it took a bit getting used to because it is heavier. And on paper, it is 20 grams heavier than the other Apple Watch models, and it does feel heavier. But actually, I haven't had any issues sleeping with it. I found that it tracks sleep pretty well, and I do use sleep mode at night so the display's not on at all and doesn't disturb me. I also personally really like the new sleep scores that come with watchOS 26. But what about using it when I'm awake? So I tend to use my watch as my primary way to pay for things, and I love the convenience of Apple Pay on the watch, and I have done for years. Being able to double tap to activate payments is just so simple to use. There's also not a limit, so I have literally paid for a car with my Apple Watch in the past. I also really like transport mode because you can easily just tap in and out of places like the London Underground or buses without even having to double tap the side. You just hold your watch against it. Likewise, you can also use quick mode for Apple Home keys. That means I can get into my house with my watch using the Aqara U200 smart lock. The display is really bright, and I love the amount of complications you can add to that watch face. It means I can easily glance down and see the time and what's coming up and see kind of how battery life is and how I'm doing my exercise rings. I can also quickly glance down and see what the weather's doing. As with every Apple Watch, the side button and digital crown are easy to use. They're responsive and apps open nice and quickly. Although if I'm honest, I don't use huge amounts of apps on my Apple Watch. I do tend to use the obvious phone, calendar, workout, fitness and wallet apps, and then I use things like Shazam, camera controls when I'm filming videos like this, and then occasionally the home app or music. But actually, for things like timers and even controlling things around my smart home, I do often use Siri on the Apple Watch more than anything else. It's just because it's quick to activate. I can raise and speak, and it works really well. I can also hold down the crown if I want to activate Siri as well. And I do find Siri responds quicker on this than my previous Apple Watch. The other new feature that I really like the idea of is gestures. This is where you can double tap your fingers to navigate through the stack and then also flick your wrist to get rid of notifications. I find that these work really well, but I am having to force myself to get used to using them because it's not how I'm used to using an Apple Watch. Over time, I think it will probably become the main way that I use it. Now, some of the biggest use that my watch gets is when exercising. And I tend to go for a run a few times a week, and I've actually got a 10k coming up in November where I'm going to get to go around Alton Towers. If you want to see anything about that, you can follow my theme park channel, Mark's Theme Parks. I'll link that below. The action button on a Watch Ultra can be configured to do a whole variety of things, but for me, I've just got it set up to start a run in workout. That means when I'm ready to go, I just hit that and I'm off. It also means you don't have the countdown on screen, which I really like for things like parkrun where they count down so quickly you haven't got time to press the button. Now, I tend to run with either Apple AirPods Pro 2 or Shox Open Run Pros. And one of the things that I found is that whilst I didn't think I'd like it, I actually really like Workout Buddy. It's really nice hearing stats and milestones throughout runs, and it's really useful keeping track of how you're doing as well. And I think Apple has struck a nice balance with this, where it isn't trying to be too motivational, it just tells you what you need to know. It does occasionally pass an anecdote about the music you listen to though. So for example, it told me to keep rocking with President the other day. Let me know below if you think President is Charlie Simpson. The other thing I found is that GPS on runs doesn't impact the battery too heavily either. This is great for longer runs. And it's a good time to talk about battery. So as I said, Apple say this has 36 hours battery life on 100%. And I tend to find they're about right. So I've been charging this roughly every other day when it gets down to about 20%. And actually, if I pushed it to go down to 0% or maybe even 5% before charging, I could probably get 2 days out of it. But I just like to get to 20 and then recharge. And actually, that longer battery life is one of the reasons I think the Ultra watches are so good. And especially why I think the Ultra 2 is actually probably the best Apple Watch for people to go to at the moment. And that's because sometimes there are longer days where you haven't got time to charge your watch. And I was getting to a point where my 7 wasn't even lasting a full day. And being able to have a watch, you know, once you charge to 100% is going to last for at least a day and a half is fantastic. And all of these features make the Apple Watch Ultra 2 a fantastic smartwatch. And if you couple that with the price you can pick up a nearly new Ultra 2 now, I actually think it's the best value watch out there right now. And if you are looking at an Ultra 2 versus an Ultra 3, I think for the price difference, it's worth it. I don't think the 3 has a big enough upgrade in kind of features and speed and kind of things it offers compared to the Ultra 2. And that's especially true when a lot of the new features actually came with the software anyway. Let me know below what you think. If you do want to pick one up, I will put links below to a couple of those resellers I mentioned on eBay. I'll also link my theme park channel below if you want to check out the Alton Towers run in November. If you've enjoyed this video, give it a like, subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you guys again soon.